Hello everyone. In my previous lecture, I discussed in detail the period of Anglo-Saxon, which stretches from 449 till 1066. It means that from the middle of 5th century till the middle of 11th century. I discuss in detail the invasions of Anglo-Saxon, where they settled or which parts of the Britain they settled, how many tribes were there, and I also discussed the tradition, culture, and the early religion of Anglo-Saxon and how they converted to Christianity. Today's lecture will focus on another invasions over England, and that invasion is known as the Danish invasion. So Danish or the people of Denmark, actually they came from Denmark. These Viking, okay, the Danish people are also known as Viking. So these Viking, they came from Denmark, they settled in the northern part of France, and later on they also settled in England. Let's discuss in detail the Danish invasions. In the late 700s, the Vikings also called the Danes. As I told that the Danish people are also known as Viking. So started attacking Northumbria, a rich culture area in England. When that was almost 8th century, 700s, right? The Viking or the Danes people, Danish people, they started attacking on Northumbria, one of the part of England, right? Northern England. So a rich culture area in England. So at first they robbed monastery, but later they took over much of the northern and eastern England. So the purpose was what? To rob England. Okay, and because these monasteries were very much wealthy, okay, so there was a lot of gold, etc. So first they robbed these monastery, but later on they took over much of the northern and eastern part of England. However, in the south there was a powerful king, and that king is known as King Alfred. You might have heard his name, King Alfred the Great. So he was living where? He was living in the south of England. He was the ruler of England, the south part of England that time, right? So of Wessex, so he was the king of Wessex, that is the southern part of England. So he stopped their expansions. Whose expansions? The Danish or the Danes expansions. The Danes who attacked over England, and they occupied, they control much part of the northern of England and the eastern of England. They wanted to occupy the southern part of England too, but there was a powerful king. His name was King Alfred the Great. You can see his picture here. He stopped their expansions. He stopped them there, right? So then what happened that after defeating them in battles, he made a truce with them and got them to accept Christianity. He defeated them and he let them to live in England, but on one condition, to accept Christianity. So after they accepted Christianity, they settled where? In England, in the southern part of England too. We're talking about the Danes, right? Now, even though Alfred strengthened Anglo-Saxon rule, the conflict with the Danes continued after his death. He struggled a lot, right, to strengthen the Anglo-Saxon rule, right, over England. But after his death, what happened? This conflict with the with the Danes people continued. So in 1016, a Danish king, his name was Canute. You might have watched a Netflix series that is known as King Valhalla, right? So there was, and that movie is also based on this Danish invasion. So there was a Danish king in 1066 and his name was Canute. Canute was the king of Norway. So took over England and ruled successfully. Right? Now later in 1042, Edward the Confessor became king, but he had no children, right? So why do we call him Edward the Confessor? Because he was a very much religious person, he was a pious person, there was a completely peace in his reign, right? So in 1042, when King Edward the Confessor, he became king, but what was the problem? That he had no children, right? So he supposedly promised. When we say that he supposedly promised, it means that we are not certain, but it is said that he promised that after his death, the throne of England will be handed over to William. So who was William? He was the Duke of Normandy, right? But later, it is said later that he named Herold. Herold was who? He was the Earl of Wessex as his successor. So there is uncertainty whether he named William the Duke of Normandy, or he named Herold, who was the Earl of Wessex, to be his successor after his death. So there was confusion, right? Now, what happened after his death? When Edward died in 1066, so his rule continued from 1042 till 1066. Harold became king, who was the Earl of Wessex. But William was furious. He got angry when he invaded England and fought Harold at the Battle of Hastings, and he won. So he defeated Harold at the Battle of Hastings, a place, right? And he won this battle. So what happened? Harold was killed in this battle, and on Christmas Day, that was 1066, William, known as William the Conqueror, became the King of England. So this is a new invasions. Anglo-Saxon, before Anglo-Saxon, there were Romans. After the Romans, Anglo-Saxons. And after Anglo-Saxons, we can see the Danish invasions. And it began in 1066. You can see that was a Christmas day when the person, the Earl of Wessex, later on became the King of England. His name was Harold. He was defeated and killed, and thus England came under the invasion, or you can say that under the control of Danish, right? Danes people, Denmark. Now, literary history. When Christianity spread in Britain, literacy increased and the Roman alphabet replaced by the old runic letter. So runic letters or runic alphabet were used by the Anglo-Saxon and were used by the Viking. So the Roman alphabet were replaced by the old runic alphabet. So poetry was still mostly spoken, but more poems were written down. Still the poetry literature was spoken but not written down. Since there were no printing press, so books had to be copied by the hand, so only a few Anglo-Saxon poems have survived. Now, the most famous is the Beowulf, an epic about a legendary hero. But we do not know that who wrote this epic poem Beowulf, because the author is unknown. So another important manuscript, that is the Exeter book, and contains many old English poems, including the Seafarer and the Wives' Lament, and there were 90 riddles. Also, they were in oral form, but we do not know that who wrote them, right? That is a manuscript that is known as the Exeter book. And in this Exeter book consists of many old English poems, including the seafarer, like the stories and the legends of the Anglo Saxon, right? Because they were seafarer, and the wives of the laments, and over 90 riddles. Now, most Anglo-Saxon poems were written by unknown author. One of the few named poets was a monk, and his name was Cadmus. Right? So, if we know the author of a few poets, so one of them is known as Cadman. How we know Cadman? Cadman is mentioned by the historian Bede when he was writing ecclesiastical history of the English people. So he mentioned there the name of Cadman, that he was a monk and he was a poet also. So who wrote in Latin and the language of the church? Who wrote in Latin? That was Bede. Bede wrote in Latin ecclesiastical history of English people, and there he mentioned a poet and a monk. His name was Cadman. Writing in English became more common during the time of King Alfred the Great. He was a great king, right? And he brought a lot of transformation to England. In 891, he started the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a historical record written in poetry and prose. So he was the man that he started to write Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. That was a historical record that is written in poetry and prose, in both form. He also promoted English translations of parts of the Bible and other Latin texts. So that was the contribution of the King Alfred the Great, who was the king of England, and he united different parts of English, and he united this Anglo-Saxon in different parts where the Anglo-Saxon they ruled, and England became like a unified country. So that was all about the Danish invasion. In our coming lecture, we will discuss in detail the Middle Ages. Thank you so much. Please do provide your valuable comment about today's lecture.